This is the Nomad Futurist podcast, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and transformation. Connect with us, share your thoughts with us at nomadfuturist.com. Let's get this started. Here are Phil and Nabeel. Hello. Welcome to Nomad Futurist. This is your host, Nabeel Mahmood from Kona, Hawaii.
This is your co-host, Philip Koblenz from Montclair, New Jersey.
And this is Sagi Brody coming to you from sunny Florida.
Sagi, welcome to the Nomad Futurist podcast. Thank you very much for taking the time. Let's start with your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Unfortunately, I can't go through the list of 20 or so companies that I've worked for because I've essentially been at the same place for 20 plus years. So I'm sorry if that's a little boring, but I'm the CTO of Webair. I've been here since the beginning, since really like 98, 99. And I'm one of the co-founders along with Michael, who was the CEO who really started us off.
You know what's amazing? I'm in a similar boat, right? Anybody that asks me anything about my background, I'm like, do you have 30 seconds? Because I can give it to you in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You don't really hear that as much these days, right? You hear people skip going from job to job, year after year after year. How do you think that experience is different from the typical job skipping? What is that? How have you grown by staying in the same job for 20 years?
Well, I mean, it's a great question because I've always had this pressure in the back of my head along the way. Like, what am I doing? Everyone else is just, riding the wave, from company to company. And if you get it right with your stock options, you become a millionaire 4 times over if you can time it right. And I've also talked to other people that have been in interviews and they would tell me, someone saw that I was at the same place for 7 years and they asked me what was wrong with me. Why didn't I leave sooner? And I think that's sort of, toxic a little bit. It shouldn't just be, where do you find that, that balancing act? If you're at a spot for too little, that's a problem. If you're out of place for too long, that's a problem. And so there's enough pressure already in the industry, with sort of shiny objects and needing to learn everything and being on top of the latest and greatest. We don't need this added pressure of sort of timing too. But yeah, for me, it was.
How old were you when you started?
I was, I was really, I guess 18, 19. I was going to college and I met Michael, who would become, my partner while I was going to college. We happened to be working at a tech company at the same time. And at some point he got sick of doing the web design and he wanted to go and start his own hosting company. And after enough coaxing, he convinced me to help him out and go along with him. That's kind of where we started. And
you started the business while you were in college.
Yeah, I was in college, and I went to Polytech. That you're familiar with it in Long Island, and I was working at a hosting company around the corner, getting paid $6 an hour to run all their FreeBSD servers. And Michael, he said he wanted to start his own hosting company. We had some servers at Interland, and eventually he convinced me. And then once we got big enough, I quit college. It wasn't, unfortunately at that time, it wasn't providing me with enough value, meaning they weren't teaching the things that were relevant to what we needed to do or learn at that time.
Well, I assume he offered you like $7.50 an hour, and you're like, I'll take it.
You know what? It had nothing to do with the money, and it was interesting because the ISP that I was at, the hosting company, there was the owner there. He basically called all the shots. He ran everything himself. He would give me limited access. And the way I looked at the proposition in my very simplistic, logical mind was I can be the second guy in charge of a T3, or I could have my own T1, and that would be my own, and it would be my baby, and I could do whatever I wanted with it, and I would own it and be responsible for it, and just it would be mine. And to me, that was more interesting. And so it just had nothing to do with money. It just was a curiosity. You want to get your hands on something. You want to be responsible. You want to own the make or break moments.
For those kids out there, a T1 or a T3 used to be the way we ordered internet access. It went from 1.5 megabits per second to 45 megabits per second, and those are basically the options. And now you get all sorts of fiber and stuff. It's weird.
Yeah.
I think that's a great story. I think culturally speaking, what's happened over the last 20, 30 years is that we've been taught that every year, 2, 3, that it's time for you to change. I think you're one of the very fortunate people that were able to identify in the pursuit of happiness or the pursuit of career as to what you really wanted to do. How did you come to that point whereby you were able to eliminate all the distractions of more money and becoming the next millionaire or billionaire in the .com era?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I would have to remind myself that I was a part owner in the business, and I don't have to, and hey, dude, why are you worrying about going to get another job and work somewhere? You own part of this business. At some point it's going to be, if you do it right, it'll be worth something and it'll be valuable and all that. And when I would work through my mind, what would it look like if I went somewhere else? I would just always come back and be like, wow, I'm really lucky. I actually have a really good situation here, and I'm working with some really great people. And I realized that, when we go to hire people at Webair, what I tell them is maybe we don't pay, maybe you're not going to get the top pay or all the bells and whistles with the benefits. But what you will get is essentially a playground. And I feel you know this because, obviously you're at a similar company, but when you're a technology provider, your customers are asking you to do all these different things, and they're pushing you to the brink for all these different softwares and technologies. And can you do this? And can you do that? And you're constantly being pushed to the edge. And so it's a great place to learn. And so I think looking at a job and opportunity of what am I going to be able to learn there based upon what services they provide and where they sit in the technology stack, that's huge. In fact, just like I kind of knew nothing before we started, we've hired so many people as interns out of school, knowing nothing, hired them based on personality that are now running the company. And a lot of them have gone on to go work for Facebook and Microsoft and Google. And because they wanted, the benefits and the cushy name. But you know what? I've had so many of them come back, sure enough, after 6 months and say, I love my title, love my stock. I love this company that I'm at now, but I miss those projects. I miss that playground. I'm too pigeonholed. Can you give me some stuff to do on the side? And that really showed me what we have to offer as an employer and what people can learn in being in an environment like that.
Yeah, I think and this has come up in the podcast from time to time. I think, to a certain extent, it's always like big company versus small company and what are the inherent tangible and intangible benefits. And I think, when someone looks at, a particular job and they try to determine whether, weighing all the factors, typically, you make a list and you're like, how much is X paying me? How much is Y paying me? What are the benefits? Does the name hold weight? And when I go to a dinner party or when I go out with friends, if I say that I work for X, Y, and Z or Google or Amazon or Netflix, it's going to be a recognizable name. So that has some value. But, the level of, flexibility that you have, the exposure to various technologies, like you said, the idea of not being compartmentalized in a particular discipline is something that you can't really explain to someone until they experience it. And I think in the benefit of a small company in general, and I would always say, especially in our world, that experience is significantly more valuable than degree or than book knowledge versus experiential knowledge. Those small companies are where you build experience, and it's impossible to it's impossible to overstate how important it is to be able to be given an environment where, you can experience what we now give our kids as like experiential learning, like the understanding that you should allow yourself as someone that gravitates towards technology to go to a place where you can determine like where you want to make an impact.
Yeah, I agree. And to that point, some of the things that we've done, is people will start off in tech support. And if you end up answering all, let's say the MySQL related tickets, then poof, you're the MySQL guru. And now you're going to be in charge of going to, define the products for the future, and be the one to set the standards. And we've done that. And I think one of the great things about that we've done at Webair is all the people that came in really started on the ground level. And those are the same folks that are now sort of the managers, and the product owners and all that, because they've shown themselves to be trustworthy, and they've wanted it. Whatever path they've kind of gravitated towards, we've supported that. And I've told people, this is not a one-way street where you just work for us. If there are things that are exciting to you technology-wise, if you want to get your hands on some shiny object, it's probably somewhere on our product roadmap. Maybe it's not on the top of my list, but maybe it's like 3 or 4. And if you come and say, hey, I'm interested next, then we'll bend our roadmap so that we win as a company and that you win, because if you're excited about it and you want to do it anyway, it just makes sense for us to kind of, become partners in that way. And that's, I think, allowed us to keep retention of people and keep them happy and engaged and feel like they're owning something.
So share with us the journey. At a very early age, you decided to be an entrepreneur. I mean, it's certainly not been the glorified environment as one would perceive that, it's always been sunny and wonderful days. How has it been for the last 23 years for you as a business owner, and as a technologist?
It's been stressful at times, very stressful, especially in a 24/7 business with downtime. As Phil knows, it can all kind of literally go up in smoke one day, and you have to kind of deal with that. I mean, I've had all sorts of crazy experiences between hackers and security issues. We had our data center in Manhattan at 32 Avenue of the Americas. Our lease was up on a specific day, and the vendor at the time, Tata, wouldn't give us a renewal. And that day happened to be the day that my wife was due to give birth to our first son. So there I am, sitting there thinking, okay, I'm gonna have a child and start a family, and then there'll be no more business. Literally on the same day. And so, going into something like that and negotiating and trying to work it all out, there's been its moments, or on my wedding day, leaving the wedding in the limo, and literally asking the limo driver to divert to the data center to deal with a DDoS attack instead of going to take pictures in the meatpacking district. Luckily we didn't have to. Those are the sort of things. So there's ups and downs, and then there's all the fun stuff too. Getting to create products and to really get on the phone with customers and hear what they need, and go and just say, yeah, I can do that. Not sure how you're going to do that, and then figuring it out after, and living up to your word. That's really fun. Or walking into a room where people know nothing about your company, already made up their mind that they're going to go another direction, and convincing them why you're a better option. Those things are very fulfilling and rewarding.
As I listen to you, obviously it's to me, it's a very familiar tale. Let's take a step back for a second. Were you always inspired by technology? Were you a technology guy growing up? Is it something you always gravitated to? Or did it happen by accident?
No, I mean, I was always one to tinker, right? And I think there's people that have different learning styles. I like to just play with things and figure them out. You can go as far back as Legos, right? I mean, I think, kind of a cheesy cliche sort of thing to say, but a lot of it kind of started with that. And then I'm lucky, the first computer I got when I was about 13 was a Gateway computer. And they had this great warranty back then where they would just replace your machine no matter what. And so when I started opening...
How did that work out for them?
Well, obviously they're out of business, so maybe not great for them, right? But for me, I'd open up my machine to upgrade memory or to poke around, and I break it. And I keep frying the board because I do it wrong, and then I call them up and they'd send me a new one. So I probably went through 5 computers, and their loss was my gain by kind of learning. And then I got involved when I was a teenager online with some of these IRC channels, and wanted to learn Linux and all that, and then getting into coding. And when I was in high school, I convinced the principal to let me take, and this is funny because I heard another one of your podcasts recently where the guest had a very similar story, but I convinced the principal to give me my own class. And I said, I'll build a website for the school, and I'll set up email for everybody, and I'll do all these things. And she said, great. And I had that all done in about a week. And then besides that, I had an hour a day to kind of, I thought I was getting over on them. I thought it was like the biggest scam. and I get to do my own thing. But what was I doing? For me, it was goofing off, but I was learning how to code. I was working with servers. I was doing all sorts of things that were fun for me. And I guess the school got the last laugh in the end, because that was all education. I learned a tremendous amount of stuff at that time. There just wasn't a teacher there, but they gave me the computers, they gave me the connection, they gave me the time. So, kudos to them.
So one of the things that I always speak to in my own experience is that just based on the way the earth revolves around the sun, I happen to be in the right place at the right time. I happen to be coming of age, 17, 18 years old, as the internet was, really starting to be commercialized. And we were essentially inventing an industry. So the reason why there were no teachers to do it, the reason why there was a very not very compelling coursework at your university when you were in college is because it just didn't exist yet. Because you were the trailblazer, you were at the frontier. I can only imagine that somebody listening to this story says, well, that might have worked for Sagi because there was no such thing as email, but now all of these schools have the email, so how would I break in a similar way? And can you identify the personality trait or that thing that you had, whether it's curiosity or whatever, that made you even, like, how would someone today go in there and try to blaze their own trail in a similar facet? Because you didn't know that the industry didn't exist yet. I mean, maybe you did, but clearly that can happen today. You just have to choose a different approach.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I wasn't sort of arming myself with skills so that I would go out and get a good job and be successful. I was just legitimately having fun, and it was exciting. And I always, just like the Legos, I always just like to create something out of nothing, and it's like coding. You sit there and you code for 2 hours, and you hit the run button, and it does what you told it to do, and that's magic. And that applies to building networks, to orchestrating different services, to whatever it is. But that magic of building something and having it come out the way that you wanted, and even the struggle of iterating and getting it to be where you need it to be, and then finally, like, it does what you want it to do. I just always love that. So I kind of liken it, to poetry a little bit too, because everyone puts their own flavor on that. You can build the same thing, 10 different ways. There's no right or wrong around these things. In fact, in my career, I've had to dabble. I've done networking. I've done programming. I've done really everything that was needed for me, but I wouldn't say that I'm an expert in any of them. There's folks that go way deeper on all of these things, but you know what? I did it my way, and it was good enough for what was needed. The other thing that you mentioned was sort of the right place and the right time. I think that's a big part of it too. You have to also be open to opportunity and recognize an opportunity when it presents itself. And I don't mean it from a technology perspective, like, crypto is going to be the next big thing. You just have to see what kind of presents itself in front of you. And for me, it was meeting Michael, who ended up being my partner, because I'm a pretty risk averse, sort of like paranoid sort of guy. I wouldn't quit college and like go start a business. I ended up meeting someone who was very, who was much more of a risk taker, and he was more of the social guy and the big thinker. And I just wanted to build cool things. And when you put us together, it ended up being a really good partnership that lasted 20 plus years. So yeah, I mean, I think I learned some cool stuff on my own. I put in the work, but I also got lucky by being presented an opportunity, but I seized it. So I would recommend that people keep their eyes open.
Yeah, I think a part of it is also, developing that passion at an earlier age and trying to figure out what you want to do or be, right? You have an interest level in technology. I mean, there was no market or industry back then, but it ended up becoming an industry. So kids or people today, there are probably not industries that exist today, but they will tomorrow or at some point in time. Crypto is a great example. Things are going to get developed as we move along. What I would like to know is, you being a risk-averse guy and going to college to get a degree and in technology, I mean, what was that turning point like? I mean, how did you end up taking such a huge risk and quitting college?
And what were your parents' responses?
Yeah, it's a good
They
question.
were happy about it.
It's funny. I would consider myself risk averse now. I think the industry did that to me a little bit, or the downtime. I probably was a little bit of a more risk taker back then. But for me, school was kind of boring. I just really loved tinkering and the thought to kind of do it, full time. It was great. And you know what? It was not really a conscious decision. It was time to enroll in next semester's classes, and I kind of just didn't enroll. And my parents were supportive, right? Like I never had stellar grades. I just don't think the way that I learn is not by, listening to someone in the room. I got to get my hands and my brains on it. So they were cool. I later found out, that my parents actually had a conversation with my business partner. He's about 15 years my senior. So they kind of called him and said, "Hey, so what are your plans for our son? And what's actually going on here?" And so I think that put some pressure on him, lit a fire under him, and maybe helped us.
Did he ask for your parents' blessing? That's the cutest partnership I've ever heard. There's a very Office Space element to it, right? I just stopped going. It's got that feeling to it. But I think that's what. I think, people try to compartmentalize things in these black and white things, right? It's either you're a risk taker or you're risk averse. But there's this fundamental thing that when something just feels right, when you're talking about a career, it's always been manipulated into, it's work versus not work. You're either relaxing or you're working. And if you just take that paradox away and you try to figure out, like, what do I enjoy doing and how do I do that, then it's not really work. And people will gravitate towards you, and you'll gravitate towards people that just kind of, are drawn to the fact that you enjoy what you're doing. And if you stop thinking about it, and I'm also conscious of the fact that, there are people that need to work, right? You don't necessarily all have the luxury of being able to just follow our passions or whatever, but you should, in terms of, I would think, if you're looking at trying to figure out what your career path is, trying to derive that from where you gain enjoyment is a fairly important way, I think, to look at it, given how much time people spend working. Don't you think?
I agree. And this comes up. Sometimes I'll talk to someone young and they'll ask me, they'll want to break into the industry, or they want to, get involved. And they ask me, what do I need to learn? What do I need to do? And there's just this air of pressure that they're putting on themselves. Like, I got to learn Linux. I got to learn Node. I got to learn this coding language. And if you're learning something just for the sake of learning it, it's not very fun. You want to learn it so you can cross it off your list, so you can say, now I know this, and it's not fun. So what I tell them is forget about learning X and focus on a goal. Maybe you want to create a website for your mom's coffee shop, and that's your goal. And in doing so, you're gonna pick up some technologies. You're gonna pick up some skills. So I would sort of let go of the pressure that I need to learn, especially in the tech industry. There's such pressure to always learn the latest and greatest, tech skills, and getting stale. And it makes it not fun. And just so sort of set a goal for yourself. I'm going to go and code a system that does this, and maybe I'll use a language that I haven't used before. And along the way, you learn things. And that's where we got lucky, because over the years, our clients would ask us, again, they'd ask us, can you do this and that? And we would just say, yeah. And it would force us to learn new things that we never had to deal with before.
Yeah, part of it is learning to solve the problem, identify what the challenge is, and then thereafter figure out how you're going to solve it. So you've been with Webair for about 23 years. What are you doing now? Retired? Heard you moved down to Florida?
I moved to Florida, but I did not retire. I'm still with Webair. I'm still the CTO. I have no plans on changing that anytime soon. We did take on a new investor late last year, and with their help, we will be accelerating the growth of the business and doing a lot more good stuff. So I'm excited. I'm happy the way that everything worked out, and it's great to have a partner, with that level of maturity, like people that are just whiz with spreadsheets that I've never, seen before, that can help us grow the business. Because, sometimes you can only take something as far as, and like I said before, you can't be an expert in everything. And so acknowledging that has been great, and bringing in experts. I wouldn't consider myself the best manager in the world or people manager. So to bring in someone who lives and breathes that's great.
I think the trying to acknowledge that you don't have to be, all things to all people is a skill that you have to learn. I think everybody always just kind of assumes that, part of the fake it till you make it kind of methodology is not recognizing what your own limitations are, when in reality, recognizing that, you have this kind of interest across a broad spectrum of things. And there are people within each one of those disciplines that can work deeper is incredibly valuable. And I imagine it took some time to kind of recognize that.
I think in the industry, fake it till you make it was normal for the good, from the 90s to maybe 2010. And then at some point the industry changed where people didn't expect companies to do everything or know everything. And actually if you said you did, or even as an individual, if you said you did, people started to look at you sideways. When I was 14, I'm sure like yourselves, and your parents were parading you around as a computer genius, okay, at that point, maybe you knew everything there was to know about computers because the scope of that was very small. Today, if you were to say you're a security expert to somebody in the IT field, they still might look at you funny and say, well, what slice of security? Is it network security? Is it breach remediation? What is it? So there's definitely the industry has acknowledged that it is about specialization today. I do think having a wide context at the beginning of one's career and sort of learning how everything works in a wide sort of way will really be beneficial. But at some point you have to pick a path and pick a specialization and sort of focus on that and go deep there.
Yeah, I think that's common with the healthcare industry, right? You go get your MD and then you get your specialization. So we as an industry have started to grow and mature, whereby that's going to start to become relevant. In the 23 plus years of you doing what you're doing now, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned about yourself and being an entrepreneur?
Well, that's a really good question. I've learned a lot about myself. I've learned, maybe what my limits are, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. I think one thing that's important too, and one of the things I've learned is that it's not just all about the technology. And you just mentioned the medical field. I think our industry can derive a lot from the medical industry. And I don't even know if there needs to be more of an emphasis on soft skills, in our industry. In the medical industry, they do bedside clinics where the where the younger residents will sort of guess as to what the issues are, and we don't do any of that. Troubleshooting as a standalone skill is just so critically important in our industry. And I don't know if colleges are teaching troubleshooting as a service skills or whatever you want to call it, but I'm sure you guys have had similar experiences where you walk up to someone who's been troubleshooting something for 2 days and you ask 4 or 5 pointed questions and you can identify the issue right away.
Usually the first question I ask is it plugged in?
Right. Yeah. Did you reboot it? But I think troubleshooting is and other soft skills like being resourceful, being a good Googler. These are things that transcend the flavor of the day, the technology of the day that you can go and take with you anywhere and apply them. Being a really good technical writer, being able to explain something, articulate something. These are things that our tech minds gloss over. We don't put any value on those types of things. Did I learn the new routing protocol? Can I configure IPv6, whatever? That's where a lot of the tech minds place their value on their technical skills. And I think people do far better in their career. And we see this when you transition from sort of being an engineer to moving towards management, that there is this, these soft skills will kind of balance you out and allow you to go further.
If you talk about the the pinnacle of technology careers, the Googles, the Amazons, we've all had employees that have gone, through our respective organizations and then on to theirs, where they want to be theoretically. And if you think about like the type of questions that they ask in an interview, those large companies, it's not really like, define for me the tenets of C programming. It is, how many jelly beans are in this thing and tell me how you came to that analysis. It's the idea of, critical thinking is way more important than, memorization and knowledge of a particular thing, because those particular things change constantly. There's, I think the way schooling has been done traditionally has, kind of focused everyone's efforts on, memorization and standardized testing, and, the SAT scores are what got you into college, and what college you went to, you decided what company you started to work at, and on and on and on. Do you have any thoughts on that, like the educational system, like the way kids are taught? Is there something that, being a father, understanding like, what you look for in an employee, and how somebody at the entry level ended up going, far in their career? Is there something that you think could be changed about the way we do education in our country and more broadly globally, that would help focus on some of those soft skills?
I think they should teach for those soft skills. I think troubleshooting should be a skill on its own, and should be taught, and there's methodologies and there's theories about how to how to localize a problem, and I'm sure you've been there, hey, can you reproduce the problem? Have you been able to reproduce it 4 times? Does it have the same result? Okay, great. What can we roll out? I mean, these are things that I think a lot of good engineers just inherently do without thinking about it. But those can and should be taught, because they will save. I mean, think about how much time we save when we can troubleshoot something quickly. I mean, now that I know so much about it, I'm like so happy that I decided not to become a doctor, because like we've all misdiagnosed and like incorrectly troubleshooted tech issues, and probably taken down networks and routers and stuff. And I can count numerous times of those. I can't imagine the amount of people I would have killed by making those same errors, had I gone a different way. So I do think that should be taught. I also, this might have changed recently, but I've met a lot of people like fresh out of college come in for interviews, and I've just noticed that they've been taught like the smorgasbord of technology. They took one class on programming and one class on networking and this and that. And I'm like, didn't anybody tell you? Like, the point of you taking all those sort of like those generic classes is, in my opinion, is to give you a kind of flavor. And then ideally you pick one of those things you like it, and that's what keeps you up all night, and that's what you're playing around with. And then you come into the interview with all these side projects that you did that had nothing to do with school or maybe your previous job, all these cool things that you worked on because you were genuinely interested in it, and it turned into a new set of skills for you. So when I interview people, I'm always upfront about, if I ask a question, I don't care where you worked on. I don't care if it was at a company or at school or at home. And to the extent that it's more so them messing around with something at home, that excites me, because it means they do have a genuine passion and curiosity around it.
I think we kind of stopped at the third industrial revolution as it entails to the educational system. The fourth industrial revolution has not caught up as to what the new teaching methods need to be. When you're interviewing people, what are some of the core competencies that you're looking at without their interest? Yeah,
it's a good question. I am guilty a little bit about like sort of name dropping, like what technologies did you work with? Like, kind of like, okay, I need to hire someone who knows X. Do you know X? But also I'll ask them like, I want to know how deep they can go. I want to know how nitty gritty they can get. Are they the type of person that has been up all night troubleshooting a problem, or do they get to a certain point and then escalate it? Because, the reason I've been successful is because the buck always stopped with me, right? And so when other people hit their limit, they troubleshooted a problem. At some point, they just give up and they just shoved it to me, and then they went home. And then I had to deal with it, and either I was going to figure it out or we were going to lose a customer. And that sort of pressure, like you figure it out, you have no choice. And so so where is that limit? Where is that threshold for that person? And you quickly will realize, on what side of the fence, they are with that. And again, it's how resourceful can you be? I remember, start doing this stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s. You couldn't Google an error message. There was no vendor you can call. If you had a problem with the Linux kernel, you can't call a company. You'd have to go into an IRC channel and maybe get lucky and be able to speak to one of the developers. Like, yeah, and you have to get resourceful. Like, I'm not proud of it, but if I had to go into an IRC room and I had to change my nickname to Jenny24F and ask some geeks for some information, that's how they would answer me. That's how I would get the answers to my questions.
We've gotten to the Dateline NBC part of this interview.
But listen, you gotta be resourceful. You can't just walk into someone's office. I don't know why my network's not working, sir. I got 5 to 10 people messaging me right away, offering up all the help in the world. Great thing there was no such thing as video chat back then. Great thing we were dealing with slow connections. But I tell you, I got my answers.
Are any of the people that responded to you people that we would know in the industry? I don't want to.
It's all right. We've got Jenny as deep fake now.
All right, it didn't happen at that point, but that often. But you know what it is? You gotta be resourceful, and that people should acknowledge. That's a skill.
Absolutely. What's next for you? I mean, you moved down to Florida.
Well, one of the things I've learned is, sometimes I'll look at things risk averse and be like, all right, we've done everything there is to do in this industry. Like there's that's it. We've hit the end of the runway, and then something like public cloud pops up, right? Or security becomes more prevalent. And so for Webair, what I've realized is our value proposition as a provider is not that we sell hosted private cloud and disaster recovery and backups, and these are very technology focused services, but we provide services that are fully managed, right? And so at some point I realized it's not the bits and the bytes and the amount of CPU memory that we're selling. Our value to our customers has been, managing, monitoring, securing, and scaling platforms. These are like boring, non-technical terms. So today I talk about, do you want to take ownership and accountability of your infrastructure? What's your appetite to be responsible? Like all these non-technical terms, and that's where the value is. So I've realized that the longevity in a company like ours is not the flavor of the day. Okay, so today it's virtual machines. In the future it'll be Kubernetes. It's those non-technical other things. It's all the wrappers. It's the managing, the monitoring, all the things I said of those technology platforms. And that means that there is a long runway. That there's longevity in our business model because the value is in wrapping around the technology. As long as we can support things, there'll be a long runway for us.
You're selling to the human condition. I think I pivoted a few years ago from trying to suggest that for those listeners that don't know much about our world, everything is wrapped around this idea of a service level agreement. There's 100% SLA. And I went from, this is why they keep me out of sales meetings now. I went from saying that, if you choose us, you're going to be up 100% of the time. And we have all these generators and UPSs and everything's great and network redundancy and all these lines. I pivoted to starting to say that the only thing I can guarantee you is that you're going to go down. It's 100% guarantee that at some point your thing is not going to be working. And the question you have to ask yourself is, when that thing doesn't work, it's the Ghostbusters model. Who are you going to call? Like, who do you want to call? Do you want to call yourself? Do you want to look in a mirror? Do you want to call Jeff Bezos? Do you want to call, Bill Gates? Or do you want to call your buddy Phil or your buddy Sagi? And unfortunately, every time I said that, they said, I'd rather call Sagi. But a small percentage of the time, they said, you know what, you put it that way, I would rather it be your problem. We used to call it the single throat to choke. And who's got a more chokeable throat than me?
So I heard a good one. I heard the positive spin was a single back to pat. So we started.
It always goes back to this Dateline thing with you. No one's patting any backs. My God.
Was that Jenny?
That was, yeah. That's right. That's the alter ego. Oh, come on. I'm sure Phil has had like a few email aliases that he was running support tickets through when it was just him as well.
Oh, Phil's got so many email aliases. I can't even keep up.
The one thing I can guarantee you is that I get the worst response when I email as Phil.
But I'll answer your question there. For me, what's great now, what other cool thing is too, is the roles have changed over the years. I was coding half the day. And I wrote all the systems that did our provisioning and automation and billing. And thank God I don't do that anymore, because the coders that we have now are much better. And then at some point I was the network admin. And then, and it's nice to kind of go through all these different roles. I was doing sales engineering for a while, which is super rewarding in its own right. Now I've just hired a VP of infrastructure to kind of run the day to day. And I'm hoping to be like a legitimate CTO, whatever that means. I think it means chief talking officer, because that's what I end up doing all day anyway. But I'll be looking at some M&A and partnerships and just taking on a new role, and that's exciting.
Let's switch gears just a little bit. Based on what you know, based on your journey, the trials and tribulations, what is it that you tell your younger self if you were to do it all over again?
Probably tell them, don't worry, things will work themselves out. You're surrounded by smart people that have common goals, people that want to come together and make things work. And the sky is not always falling, and just look at the long road, and be grateful for what you have, and focus on the good. There's a lot of good. This is a great industry, and there's so many aspects of it that are just at their infancy. So I think anyone who's looking to get involved with any of the aspects, if it's cloud, if it's security, if it's networking, it's all at its infancy. And there's so many ways to make yourself. Like I'm involved with a lot of different aspects of the industry. In one little group that I'm in, for like a software vendor, there's a bunch of us who are just representatives of companies for a software vendor. I'm not the best at that particular software, but I know more about networking than that whole group of people. So for that group, I'm the networking guy. And when I'm in this other social technology group that I'm this other sort of guy. So I think it is important to kind of define yourself as, what do I want to be known as? What can I be known as? What works? What kind of fits into my lifestyle?
I'm gonna wrap up here with a question about the times we live in today. You have been running a company successfully for the last 23 some odd years. You sold a portion of that company and brought in investors. You also moved your entire family from Long Island to Florida. All while we have all been embroiled in some out of control, unregulated pandemic. What challenges has that presented to you? What benefits have you seen from that? How has it changed your life in any way? How has it inspired any of those decisions and made those decisions either happen or be more, difficult to achieve?
Yeah. So I wasn't interested in moving as much as my wife was. And I decided to come down here to appease her, to look around. And I figured when she saw all the bugs, she changed her mind. But then when I got down here, I kind of liked it. But one of the things that really put me over the edge to move was just sort of this thing that a buddy of mine said, that to the extent that you're uncomfortable in life is to the extent that you will be successful. The more uncomfortable you are, the more successful you can be.
Oh man, and I should be really successful. Geez Louise.
And it goes back to the whole risk thing, but I knew that, listen, I grew up on Long Island. I had a great upbringing. And I transitioned really at 18 from having, parents sort of being coddled by parents to having a much older business partner that really just took such good care of me as almost like an older brother. And, I felt like I had to go out there on my own, and I had to put myself kind of out in the wilderness and be there for myself and force myself to kind of just deal with new things and new situations. It's a little risky, whatever, but I'm happy that I did it. Good things will come.
Life begins at the end of your comfort zone.
Sagi, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. This has been phenomenal. What a great story. What an inspirational story. And you're one of the very fortunate people that have been able to surround yourself with good people and good mentors. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me. I just wanted to thank you guys for what you guys do for the industry. When you contacted me, I read up on it. I thought it was really amazing. I've been involved in a few groups to kind of help promote education and learning. I know that you guys run a non-for-profit as well with all this, so I'd love to contribute and just support you guys because it's great what you're doing.
This has been great. Nothing lasts forever. Markets will come back, currencies will rebound, businesses will go on, and we'll all move on. That could happen next week, next month, or next year. I'm confident that those who prepare rather than panic will come out of this stronger. Thank you for joining us. This has been brought to you by Nomad Futurist. Check us online at nomadfuturist.com.